Guadalajara, Mexico is quickly becoming a destination for a lot of foreigners and expats who maybe aren't that into Mexico City or the Playa del Carmen or the Puerto Vallartas. And a lot of you have been asking us, what do we need to know about living in Guadalajara? So in this video, we're going to tell you everything you need to know about moving here based on you living here a couple years already, and me, I'm now over a year here.
So if you like content like this about moving abroad and living in places like Mexico, as well as how to create a location-independent business so that you can actually afford to do so and you have the flexibility to do so, make sure that you subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss a single video. You can also like this video. That helps us out a lot with our goal of reaching 1 million entrepreneur expats and aspiring expats. And in addition, if you're interested in learning more about moving to Mexico, you're definitely going to want to check out our Moving to Mexico guide right below this video. So Amanda, what are some of the things that you've seen that people need to know about in terms of living here in Guadalajara?
Well, one of the things that has come up is how the electric or internet or those kinds of bills work. Because in the United States, we're used to just, swiping a credit card and things just kind of working.
Yeah.
Not so much here in Mexico. So what do people need to know about that?
Well, it's a little bit more complicated, but as long as you have a local bank account, it's going to be easy. That's the number one thing you need, especially if you're getting residence here in Mexico, is that'll allow you to get a local bank account. Once you get a local bank account, it's fairly easy to pay your internet and your water and your electric bill through that local bank account. They have ways to either do transfers from that account or to log into the bank's app. In a lot of cases, they have convenios, or basically relationships with those service providers so that you can really easily pay them from your bank's app. We have BBVA Bancomer, and with that, it is pretty easy to send payments to pay for those different things. In addition, if you haven't yet gotten residency, or for whatever reason you don't want to get a local bank account, in many cases you can still open a digital wallet. We have Mercado Pago, which is pretty useful. There's also Claro Pay. And I believe you don't need a residency to get those. You'll want to just double check though.
We did not. I did not have my residency.
You didn't? That's true. Yeah, Amanda did not have hers yet. So you can get a digital wallet and basically send yourself money into that digital wallet from something like Wise, and then use the digital wallet to pay the bills. And some of them also will take PayPal. Like I know our internet provider does take PayPal. They're called Total Play, and they let you pay with PayPal on the website. But just note that if you do use something like that, typically you're paying a very high exchange rate. PayPal does not have extremely friendly exchange rates when paying foreign transactions. And they also have kiosks that you can go to in cash, basically pay in cash, or go to like the local OXXO and say, hey, I want to pay my cell phone bill, or I want to pay my electric bill. And a lot of the times you can do that at your local OXXO too.
What is the important thing they need to know about the electric bill that a lot of people do not know about until it hits them on the bill?
Absolutely, and we're going to be talking about something very related to this later, which has to do with air conditioning and heating and all that. But the important thing with electricity is that you definitely do not want to go above a certain electrical consumption every month, or specifically like every pay period, which usually they'll send you the bill every 2 months. Because if you do, then not only are you paying a higher marginal tier for your service, they will send you into a plan that's called DAC, or Domicilio Alto Consumo, something like that. Basically, which means that because you're consuming so much electricity, for the next 12 months, your electric rates are going to be double or triple. I know here in Guadalajara, it's about 250 kilowatt hours every month on average. So if you go above that for 12 months, if your average goes above that 250 kilowatt hours per month, then you're going to be put on DAC, which is very, very, very bad. And if you've got a couple AC units, a bunch of computers, you're running space heaters several hours a day, or you're like us and maybe you have a jacuzzi on your roof, it's very easy to get close to that. We fortunately do have some solar panels, and we've found some ways to avoid using too much power. But you definitely want to keep an eye on that electric bill so that you don't cause problems and have to pay a bunch more money, and more importantly, get your landlord to hate you, because then he or she will be stuck with that bill because it's in their name, which is another important thing to note. your electric and water, and depending on how you're renting, a lot of your other home services as well, like your internet, may not actually be in your name. If you're renting a furnished apartment, typically the internet bill is also in the name of the landlord, and in almost all cases, the electric and the water stays in the name of the owner of the home. So number one, it's going to come with their name. So if you do need your electric bill, let's say to open a bank account, don't worry that it doesn't have your name on it. It's not like the US where like there's credit and you switch the bills over to the person who's living there or whatever. It always has the homeowner's name, but you can still use that as proof of an address for a bank account or anything like that. You just need to take the paper copy of that bill. But definitely do not go above that certain tier of electric usage, because you're going to get penalized and your landlord will then later get penalized for many, many months to come. So really important to know that.
Next thing we get asked a lot about is water. Probably the number one question we get is actually about water. Is there water? How does the water work? Do they do water delivery? Can you shower? So let's talk about water.
Okay, so a lot of things to note about water. First of all, we'll talk about the safety and talk about like drinking water and everything like that. So in Mexico, there are some exceptions, but for the most part, you don't want to drink the water that comes out of the faucet. Most people coming to Mexico know that, although it's just really important to note. It's not that the water is always bad or that it's just like gonna kill you right away or make you sick. It might not, and if you have a strong stomach, you could probably get by with drinking it occasionally if you absolutely had to and there was nothing else. I just really wouldn't recommend it. And if you're in like a huge pinch and literally there's nothing around, there's no OXXO open where you can go and get a bottle of water, you can boil the water and drink that, but I would not do that very frequently, and I'd also recommend not cooking with the water either. So if, for example, you're going to make spaghetti and you need to fill the pot up with water, we typically will do that with drinking water, and we'll get into how to get the water delivered in a minute. But you don't want to use the tap water for things like eating and cooking, especially if whatever you're cooking is going to be sitting in that water for obvious reasons. In addition to the fact that the water system here, like that the cities have, is not the most consistent or necessarily the most well-maintained, meaning it might be perfectly fine one day, the next day it might not be that great. There's not a ton of consistency or quality control. The other thing, which I think honestly is even more relevant, is that all the houses here will either have a well underneath the house, which is called a cisterna, or not even a well like a freshwater well. It'll be just like a giant tank, basically, underneath the house or underneath your driveway or somewhere like that, where you keep your water reserves. Or you'll have what's called a tinaco, or a big water tank, on top of your roof. So either of those two things, you're probably going to have the water sitting there for a while, so it's going to be able to accumulate bacteria, which, another important thing to note, you want to make sure that your cisterna or your tinaco is cleaned out every 6 months. Typically, you want to have a professional do that instead of doing it yourself, because it's a huge pain to do. And for $30 or $40 US, you can have someone actually come and empty that out and clean it out for you to get all the algae and bacteria and everything else off, and sanitize it and make sure there's a little bit of chlorine in it as well to keep the water clean for months to come.
What are those little drops that people put in the water when they're using it for cooking?
Oh, that's a good reminder. So there's also drops that you can buy. Let's say you wash your vegetables with the sink water. Totally fine, you can do that, but you have to make sure you put little drops in them to sanitize the vegetables, and you typically will let that sit in there for about 15 minutes. I believe they're made mostly out of colloidal silver, so what it does is it disrupts the bacteria on the food or in whatever water you're using. Typically, both will have germs, so if you're serious about cleanliness and things like that, and we definitely use those when we get salad and want to wash it. So you'll put those drops, let it sit in there, and then strain the water out. You can also just use clean water to wash salad. That's certainly another option, but you're probably gonna use a lot of water if you eat a bunch of greens like we do.
So let's talk about showering. Can you shower with this water? Yes, everybody showers with this water. However, However, this is an important note and something I experienced with my skin. It's very hard water. Even with the filter, you want to make sure that you put a filter on the shower. It's still pretty hard water. So what happens is that, at least for me, my skin really started to dry out, and so did my hair.
It depends on where you're at, for sure, like which city you're in.
Also true, because in Guadalajara, it's very dry climate. So if the skin's already drying out from the water and your hair's drying out from the water and it's dry climate, then you basically end up having a lot of skin issues like I did. Some of you have also reported having skin issues as well. But if you're like in Playa del Carmen where it's super humid, then maybe that can counterbalance some of the moisture that you might be missing if you are somewhere like in Guadalajara. So here's what we do in Guadalajara. Moisturize, 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 and moisturize some more. One trick that my nail tech told me was you can actually go to the pharmacy, buy a bottle of Lubriderm, and then you can get a separate bottle of glycerin, or glycerina is what they call it, and literally just dump the bottle of glycerina in your moisturizer, and that helps a ton. In addition to that, when it comes to hair, ask at your local hair salon because people deal with this all the time. I was recommended a Spanish brand called Salerm 21. Which actually I'd known about that since I was a kid because my mom used to put it in my hair when I was a kid. That's what was recommended, and that's helped a lot with its leave-in conditioner, and that's helped a lot with the dryness that I've been experiencing. And also, in fairness, my skin and my hair could have also just been reacting more because I have been pretty much living in humidity my whole life, and now there is pretty much no humidity. And then
actually, it's not dry here. It's just that Miami's very humid.
Very humid.
I mean, yeah. I would say the humidity here is similar to places like California.
Yes.
But in Miami, you're dealing with like
it's
60 or 70%
yeah.
humidity. So here it's more similar to California.
So when you go through big like temperature changes like that, or you go through big ambiente changes, like environmental changes like that, then your skin can react, as mine was.
So what else? A lot of people have asked us about brushing teeth as well. For the most part, like we brush our teeth in the shower or with the sink water, never had any issues with that. I've heard some anecdotal evidence that if you come here and you're really sensitive and you use that water for brushing teeth and you get too much of it in your mouth or swallow too much, maybe it can give you like an upset stomach. So what I've heard recommended is that if you're just coming, let's say, to visit for a few days, you probably, want to maybe just have a bottle of water and put a little bit of that on your toothbrush for brushing. I don't think it's such a huge deal, but I guess in context, it's not really a big deal if you get a little sick the very first time you move to Mexico and you do that, or you eat some street food or whatever, because your stomach isn't used to all the different bacteria and everything else here, which I know it sounds gross, but it's just like everywhere you go, you're going to have a different flora and all that. So your body sometimes takes, let's say, a few weeks to just get used to everything. But the food is very healthy here. It's not that the food isn't healthy. In fact, I think it's a lot healthier than in the U.S.
100%.
And it's a lot less processed. But yeah, between the water and just being exposed to it and everything else, you might take a little bit of adjusting. So if you're just coming for a vacation or to visit, maybe just do yourself a favor and don't risk it, and just use a little bit of bottled or garrafon, like the big container water, which we'll tell you how to get in a second. Use that to brush your teeth instead of the sink water. But as you actually go adapting and you get a little bit of a stronger stomach as well, we brush our teeth with this water, no problem.
So let's talk about water delivery. This is actually a question that came in from one of our Effortless Revenue Mastermind clients. He'd been in Mexico before, but now he's in Guadalajara. And he's like, who are the water delivery people here? Because water delivery is a very common thing in Mexico because no one's drinking the tap water. So the main ones are, or at least the ones that you see the trucks for in Guadalajara, are Ciel and Bonafon. We prefer Bonafon. It is more expensive. How much is it per garrafon? Like 50 pesos or something like that?
About 55 pesos. So $3.50.
Depending on the
about
exchange
$3
rate.
or so per big container of water, which really isn't that bad considering. You can get the Ciel brand for a little bit cheaper, but Bonafont is better, and it's got more balanced mineral content, and it's just from what we've experienced and also what we've heard, it's just healthier water in general. It doesn't have as much salt. It's more balanced.
There's also a lot of water refilling kiosks, and then in addition to that, there's convenience stores everywhere. Like, for example, maybe we weren't paying attention to our water consumption and we're out of water, and we WhatsApp the Bonafont guys, and then they'll show up the next day. But sometimes, depending on their delivery routes and what they've got going on, they might be a little bit delayed. I'll just run on over to the convenience store, buy a Guadalajara there, like a little mini one, and we're good. Or sometimes we'll have like the big ones downstairs, and then maybe we'll have like a mini one on the second floor, or if we have guests, so we don't have to keep going up and down the stairs all the time for water.
One thing that I'll mention though is a lot of people in the US will drink the tap water there and say, oh, like I could never live in Mexico because you guys can't drink the tap water and it's so dangerous and whatever. Guys, look at the actual water quality in your city in the US. Like, they have reports on this stuff, and you could say, hey, in LA, what's in the water? And they're going to say, obviously, fluoride and things like that probably should not be in the water for various reasons. But if you look beyond that, you've got heavy metals and lead, cyanide, like all these other things.
Well, we had the
like,
scandal with Flint, Michigan.
Yeah, I mean, look at what happens in places like Flint, Michigan, for example. But besides that, I mean, just generally speaking, can you drink the water in theory in most places in the U.S.? Yes. But should you actually be doing it? Is it really good for your health? Probably not. And we kind of learned that a little bit more living here, because you drink the water like in those the purified water from those containers, you just feel a lot better, especially Bonafont. It's really good water.
Speaking of which, because people don't really drink the tap water here, public water fountains are not really a thing here. So you always want to make sure that if you're leaving the house, we always make sure to have water bottles on us. You could go buy water, of course, but we'll always make sure we have one of our handy dandy water bottles with us. And I have noticed that since we have to buy the water here, I guess I'm just more conscious of it, and then I find myself drinking more water. Okay, so next thing is air conditioning. Now, this totally depends on what part of Mexico you're in, because if you're like in Mérida or Cancun or Playa del Carmen or Puerto Vallarta, where it's very hot, very humid, very sticky, we see you guys on YouTube and you're like, I got like 4 mini splits and they're all running at the same time. We see you guys on YouTube. Now, the good thing about Guadalajara is that other than a couple months out of the year, which last year they said was obscenely hot and unusually hot, it's usually pretty temperate. In Guadalajara, the weather is much cooler. I think Mexico City is colder from what we've heard than Guadalajara. But generally speaking, the weather in Guadalajara is usually very temperate. There have been a couple of spring months where it's been way hotter than usual, but they're out of the ordinary. It's usually very temperate climate, and you don't need to be running AC or the mini splits all the time. So that's good news, because it'll save you a lot of money on that electric bill. That being said, there are a couple months out of the year here that felt like hell last year.
Yeah, and we're glad that we had the AC units, and you can often just buy those. Even if you're renting a house like we are, you can buy a mini split if there's not one. It'll cost you a few $100, but it'll definitely come in handy, especially during those summer months. And if you do want one, it's recommended that you buy one around now, like before the beginning of the year, or definitely before spring, because by the time April rolls around, the prices go up sometimes 20 or 30% or more, and it's really difficult to find someone to actually install them, versus if you get one in the winter or right before the spring starts, then you may be able to find one a lot cheaper and also get it installed a lot cheaper and a lot quicker.
Yeah, and one thing that's a little bit different here is the hottest months of the year are like April, May, June, and then in July it's when it started to start cooling off. So that's something to keep in mind, because that's a little bit different. Most people are more in the US, at least, they're like, oh, it's still cool in April. Not here. It's real high here in April.
And like we mentioned earlier, be really careful with that electric bill if you do decide to go out and buy a mini split, or if you're maybe living in a newer building or house that has them built in, because if you go above that certain tier, and you're going to want to research it if you're coming to Guadalajara or a different city, you're going to want to make sure you stay away from that duct. because that DAC level is not a level you want to be on for electricity. It's basically going to force you into the Stone Age for the next 12 months because the electricity will be so unbelievably expensive if you go above that tier. So be careful. Don't run the ACs all day. We've got ours connected to Wi-Fi, and we have a whole system that I built in the house that checks, whether there's motion in a room, and it can turn the AC off and the lights off and everything else. You don't have to go that overboard, but you definitely do not want to leave these running if you're not in that room. That's very important.
All right, now let's talk about air quality, because quite a few of you have actually asked about air quality in Guadalajara. Now, Guadalajara is considered to have moderate air quality. You're going to have to explain these numbers.
Yeah, so they have an air quality index of anywhere between about 51 and 100. 51 on the lower end is about moderate versus 100 is good. There's different ranges for different cities, so we're at about that. Mexico City is significantly worse. So they, on average, are at about 18, which is like very, moderate or very bad or something. I don't know
you'll
what the
see it
exact
on the
number
local
was.
news here every once in a while. You'll be like, alerta ambiental Mexico, which means like, hey, there's an environmental alert in Mexico City. Then they'll start adjusting the circulación, which is a thing they do in Mexico City, that you can only drive your car certain days of the week at certain times because of population and traffic, but also because of the air quality.
Yeah, from what we've seen, the air quality in Mexico City, and a lot of times can be unbearably bad, but Guadalajara is definitely better than that. And it's also better on average than LA, but depending on the season, it's worse than New York City, and it's worse than, let's say, certain areas of certain cities in Texas like Houston or Chicago in a lot of ways. But also you look at it, and we're in a city that's much more dense, so there's more kind of concentrated traffic versus you're out in the suburbs. You don't have as much traffic necessarily per area. And it also varies a lot by neighborhood. So if you're in like Tlaquepaque or Chapultepec or downtown, then you've got a lot more streets, a lot more traffic. Here in Chapalita, there's a lot of smaller tree-lined streets. It's more residential. There's not a ton of commercial stuff. And the other thing that's really cool is that people are walking to everything, so you don't have to drive as much unless you need to go to another area. And
we'll get to transportation.
We'll talk about transportation as well.
If you really need some fresh air, there's a lot of countryside that you can go to. You can go to Chapala, you can go to Tequila, you can go, where are we going this weekend? Etzatlan is where we're going. Yes?
Etzatlan.
I keep saying it wrong. Yeah. I'll get it right eventually. It took me 8 months to figure out how to say Xochitl. But there's ranches, there's countryside, so if you really need a break, it's easily accessible within about an hour.
Yep. And while we're on the topic of like air quality and climate control and everything else, some people have asked about heating, like does it get super cold? Believe it or not, the winters here actually can be a little chilly. Depending on what your set point is for that. Obviously, if you're coming from, let's say, Toronto, the winters are not going to seem very cold. The lows here about November through January, which is most of the cold season, can be as low as about 48 to 52 degrees Fahrenheit, which is not really too bad, but sometimes I have had to bundle up in a bunch of blankets or turn on a space heater. But we didn't really need to do that for more than a couple weeks out of the year last year. It's not really too bad. And if you're coming from somewhere, that does have a
extreme weather changes.
Extreme weather, like cold climate, you're not really going to notice it very much. But it is a lot colder in the winter than it is in the summer. So just something to note. But you probably aren't going to need to get any fancy heaters. Maybe a little space heater or something from Amazon if you get super cold at night could be handy.
Or maybe you do what we do, where a mini split in the master bedroom has cooling and heating. You could also do that.
Yeah, so if you're going to invest in a mini split anyway, usually for an extra $30 or $40, you can get one with the heating feature as well, which is kind of nice.
All right, so transportation. Now, one of the things we really like about Guadalajara is the city's actually pretty well planned out. In most neighborhoods that the expats live in specifically, you don't really need a car. We barely use the car unless we're going on some sort of weekend trip or day trip or something like that, or maybe we just need to go across town and we have Daisy with us, and so we can't Uber. Daisy's our dog. But typically we barely drive. all the necessities that we need are within a 10-minute walking radius.
It's really cool what you can get to walking here.
I mean, we're talking carnicerias, we're talking vegetables, fruits, salons. How do you say tintoreria in English? I'm forgetting right now.
Like dry cleaners.
Oh, dry cleaners, alterations, dentists, doctors, pharmacies, banks. You can walk to all of this stuff. And that's basically all you need to live. So
Pretty much. I mean, we haven't had to use the car in the last 2 weeks at all.
yeah.
We do have a car, and we use it for more getting out of town, trips to different places. But on a day-to-day, we're not really using it at all. The other thing is, so there are some walkable neighborhoods. That most of those are Providencia, Chapalita, where we're at, Chapultepec, Tlaquepaque, Zapopan, and downtown. And there is a subway. There's a public transportation system. The subway does connect some neighborhoods, but it's not super comprehensive, although they are building it more and more every day. And the buses are all right, and they'll get you where you need to go to eventually. But if you're in like rush hour traffic, for example, they're super crowded and tend to be standing room only. And they're going to take forever in a lot of cases, unless you live and are going to somewhere right on that bus route. I mean, try it out. We haven't really done the buses, although we've gone on the subway here a couple times. But typically how we get around is Uber. And that's, just a few dollars each way, about $4 to $6 per one-way trip, unless it's rush hour or raining, which is a whole other topic that we're going to get into.
Very important. Guadalajara has a rainy season. They call it Las Lluvias, and Guadalajara takes, when it rains, it pours to a whole other level. I thought I had seen a lot in Florida in terms of downpours. You ain't seeing nothing until you have been in Guadalajara, where the sky literally just opens up and it's buckets of water that start coming down with pretty much no warning at all. It's not even a sprinkle, it's just a dump.
And if we had a kayak, we could just go take it boating down the roads.
And because of Las Lluvias, Guadalajara tends to flood. So main streets will get flooded. There was like a sinkhole in one of the main streets this year because there was more unusual flooding.
I think it was like 20 feet wide and deep.
Yeah, there was one really bad storm that we had earlier this year where our street literally turned into like a river. Not kidding. Now, it's not like, I don't know, some places it can get very dangerous in terms of the water levels, depending on how bad the storm is. That did happen this year. On our street, I mean, it was mostly dangerous insofar as it was almost like rushing water.
You're not going to want to drive in the rain when it's
No, you're
pouring.
definitely not going to want to drive in the rain
careful.
here. The way that our landlady told us, if you are stuck somewhere and it starts raining, just stay there because driving here in the rain is dangerous.
Yep. And what months were that?
Ooh, Las Lluvias is like all summer.
I think it was most of the summer. So mainly between June and September.
Yeah.
Is what they say. It's typically between June and September. And outside of that, like, it does rain occasionally, but it's not super, super bad.
No. I mean, it hasn't rained in a few weeks. We're at the end of October. While we're filming this, it hasn't really rained at all. But yeah, during that, it's like they make up for the whole year of it not really raining in those few months and just dump buckets of water on the streets. So that's basically what you need to know about living in Guadalajara. A lot of you guys are also going to be asking us about cost of living. We did a whole other video specifically on cost of living where we went line by line by line. So we will make sure to link that for you guys below. We hope you guys really enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. It helps us with the algorithm gods. In order to get this in front of more people, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we have coming out on this channel. And if you are interested in global citizenship, living in other countries, digital nomadism, you got to figure out how to make money. So make sure to download our Make Money From Anywhere guide for free below.